Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that's honestly pretty unbelievable, an unprecedented modern crisis facing a former global superpower. We're going to unpack exactly how an ultra-rich nation, one with centuries of rock-solid stability, somehow managed to turn itself into a virtually ungovernable country. And to do this, we're tossing out the politics and relying strictly on the data and the underlying systems at play. Just look at the sheer jarring contrast here. Back in the 19th and 20th centuries, the British Empire literally ruled over a third of the people on Earth. Fast forward to 2026, and that exact same country has cycled through 6 prime ministers in just 9 years. It's a total political and economic meltdown happening all at once. So how in the world did they get here? To answer that, we're going to deconstruct 6 interconnected systems. We'll hit the fall of an empire, Brexit and mounting debt, the bond market doom loop, the wealth tax trap, a fractured political system, and wrap up with economic lessons for all. Let's jump right in.
Part 1, the fall of an empire. To really get this, we've got to set our baseline and understand just how high up Britain was starting from. Think about this. Britain was so incredibly rich and powerful that they literally wrote the rules of global trade. At their peak, they manufactured 20% of everything on Earth. They completely pioneered the modern economy. We're talking the steam engine, the factory, industrial banking, the telegraph, even the modern stock exchange. They were absolutely the undisputed heavyweights of the global economy. But flash forward to today, and the strain on the British economy is just everywhere. We're looking at rising unemployment, totally stagnant salaries, local councils that are flat out bankrupt, and public utilities falling into serious disrepair. This is the harsh transition from past glory to a very stark present reality, where public services are crumbling and the National Health Service is seeing record waiting lists.
Section 2, Brexit and mounting debt. So what was the catalyst here? Let's look at the macro events that really sparked this downward spiral.
For a long time, Britain's decline was actually a really slow burn. Over about 150 years, manufacturing output steadily dropped from that 20% high down to just 2% as the rest of the world caught up and industrialized. But then, boom, a series of rapid-fire hits. In 2016, we saw the massive political earthquake of the Brexit vote, where Britain chose to leave the largest free trade zone on Earth. Almost immediately after, COVID-19 hits in 2020, forcing unprecedented government borrowing. And by 2022, the Ukraine war and resulting sanctions sent global energy prices absolutely through the roof. And it's the compounding cost of all this that's so crucial. Because of all the new customs declarations, the VAT handling, the border checks required after leaving the EU, Britain's GDP is set to be 6% smaller than it would have been inside the European Union. And for a massive economy like the UK, that 6% represents tens of billions of pounds lost every single year.
Which brings us to part 3, the bond market doom loop. This is honestly the most fascinating and maybe the scariest part of this explainer. Because when debt piles up, the politicians aren't the only ones in charge anymore. Meet the invisible government.
Okay, to really understand this, we have to quickly break down bond yields. Basically, governments borrow money to cover their deficits by issuing bonds. Now, these bonds can be resold by traders on a secondary market. If investors panic and dump those bonds, the price of the bond crashes. But because the bond pays out a fixed amount of cash, the effective yield, or the interest rate, shoots straight up. And here's why that matters to you and me. The government constantly has to borrow new money. If that resale market yield goes up, the government is suddenly forced to pay that much higher, much more expensive interest rate on all their new loans. These traders hold incredible power. They don't write angry letters to their MP, they just sell.
And oh man, did they start selling. Why? Because of this shocking figure. UK public debt relative to GDP basically doubled, going from roughly 50% in 2008 to over 100% by 2020. That colossal mountain of debt was making investors incredibly nervous.
This whole situation boiled over in September 2022. Prime Minister Liz Truss announced a mini budget that featured £45 billion in completely unfunded tax cuts. Well, the bond vigilantes looked at that massive borrowing, panicked, and dumped UK bonds violently. Yield spiked from 3.5% to over 5% in a matter of days. The pound absolutely crashed. The Bank of England literally had to step in to stop pension funds from collapsing. It was so chaotic that a tabloid newspaper famously live-streamed a head of lettuce to see if it would outlast the prime minister. And, well, it did. After just 49 days, Liz Truss delivered this quote and resigned.
And that lettuce incident brilliantly illustrates the doom loop Britain is currently stuck in. Let's walk through it. Step 1. A massive mountain of existing debt makes traders nervous. Step 2. Because they're nervous, traders demand higher yields to keep lending. Step 3. Those higher yields make every single new government loan drastically more expensive. Step 4. To pay that rising interest bill, the government has to borrow even more money, which means cutting into essentials like education and healthcare. Step 5. That bigger debt makes traders panic even more, and boom, the loop restarts. Britain became completely frozen. They can't borrow to invest because the bond market will punish them, but if they slash spending and raise taxes, it completely kills the economic growth they so desperately need. Section 4. The wealth tax trap. Desperate for a way out of this freeze, the government tried to solve its revenue problem by tweaking some ancient tax laws. For over 200 years, London has been this incredible magnet for the global super-rich. Let's look at a hypothetical businessman. Let's call him Dimitri to understand why. Dimitri makes £1 million locally and $20 million abroad. Now, if Dimitri lives in New York, the U.S. taxes his worldwide income, handing him an £8.4 million tax bill. Ouch. But under the UK's historic non-domicile, or non-dom status, London only taxed his local £1 million income. His total tax bill? Just £450,000. That wild incentive is exactly why 74,000 super-rich individuals chose to settle in London, bringing a ton of businesses, jobs, and consumption right along with them. But in 2025, the Labour government decided to abolish this non-dom status. They calculated it would raise about £13 billion over 5 years. And sure, it looked absolutely great on a spreadsheet, but practically, the wealthy just packed their bags. An estimated 16,500 millionaires left the UK in 2025 alone. That is the largest single-year outflow ever recorded. The policy triggered massive capital flight, literally taking consumer spending and critical investments right out the door with it. Part 5. A fractured political system. So, what actually happens to a society when the economy freezes, public services start failing, and the wealth just leaves? That economic anxiety spills over into the political system. For 300 years, British politics was a highly stable two-party game. But the May 2026 local elections totally shattered that system. Just look at this vote share. We're seeing an unprecedented five-way split. Reform UK at 26%, the Greens at 18%, Conservatives and Labour completely tied at 17%, and the Liberal Democrats right there at 16%. All five parties are within 10 points of each other. And here's why that is so incredibly destabilizing. In Britain's first-past-the-post voting system, whoever gets the most votes in a district wins. Simple, right? In a two-party system, the winner usually has around 50% support. But with five deeply fractured parties, a candidate can actually win power with just 25% of the vote. That means someone can govern even when a whopping 75% of the electorate actively voted against them. It's just deepening this huge crisis of governability and public trust. All right, part 6. Economic lessons for all. Let's bring this all together. What can the rest of the world, especially fast-developing nations like India, actually learn from Britain's exact missteps? There are 3 critical takeaways here. First up, do not punish capital before you can actually replace it. Slapping heavy wealth taxes on people without having a robust wealth creation ecosystem ready to replace that lost capital, it just triggers severe capital flight. Second, developing nations absolutely must prioritize investing in education and healthcare. If your nation falls into the trap of spending more on debt interest payments to traders than on your own citizens' development, your growth dies, period. And third, nations really need to rethink the first-past-the-post voting system. A deeply fractured electorate playing by those old rules just leads to wildly unrepresentative and unstable governments. Which leaves us with a pretty massive question. As global debt keeps mounting and traditional political systems fracture all across the world, is your country ignoring these warning signs? Are you falling into the exact same trap? Take a hard look at the systems around you. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the data, keep analyzing those systems, and I will see you in the next one.